1 year after 28 years later, did the Bone Temple continue my disappointment? No. Hi guys, welcome to Primetime Mitch, and today we're going to be talking about 28 years later, The Bone Temple, directed by Nia DaCosta. This is a continuation of last year's 28 years later that you can find my review for here on YouTube, and to say the least, I wasn't that impressed. I found a lot of inconsistencies in that film that I really couldn't get over throughout, and also I could not stand the ending. I couldn't stand how goofy it was and how much of a swerve it was, so I didn't hold out a lot of hope for this movie. In fact, actually I was looking forward to the pork pie I had just before the screening rather than the actual film itself. I did have a somewhat of an interest because Nia DaCosta's Candyman is very impressive, looks really good, and expands on the lore and puts enough unique and new ideas in there that it doesn't ever try and warp and twist and dismantle the original in any way. So I was interested in what she could bring to this, and especially to the story that I knew they were going down the road of, which was the Jimmy Gang. I had my reservations in the original movie because I really didn't think that the goofy Power Ranger style nonsense that was going on should have been associated with the character that they were dressed up as. I don't think Jimmy Savile needed to be brought into that movie. I could understand the undertones, and anybody that says, oh, you're missing the point or you don't quite understand it, I can understand things and get the point and still not like it. And I didn't like it. So I thought, well, if this movie is going to be all about that story and a continuation of that, I'm probably not going to like this. So well, I'll just underlie, this is a non-spoiler review. I'm just going to give certain setups so I can talk about it. But you do start this movie with the initiation of Spike's character, played by Alfie Williams, very well in the last movie, by the way, into the Jimmy Gang, and he sort of doesn't want to be there. You know from the first movie what kind of character Spike is. He's not turned by this group of sinister individuals. He is pretty much the child that he is in the first one, and unfortunately, you know, we can talk about that later as to whether there's a character development there or not. But he is initiated into this gang, and then we are taken to the Bone Temple ruins of Dr. Kelson and his scientific research and his attempts to understand what's going on in a peaceful, level-headed way. And he has a relationship with the Alpha Samson, who during this is explored in his own way. There's quite an interesting scene in there where he is devouring something, which is a nice throwback. I won't let that one out of the bag. What you get from this movie is the sense that they are going down the route that they want to look at how humans are far more worse than any monsters that are created, which is fine, but I do think it's sort of overtaking the zombies at this stage, and you're wondering what movie they're actually trying to make. This is essentially a zombie apocalypse franchise, and it's veering down another route. Now, I'll say this movie looks fantastic. It really does, and so did the last one. I never had any complaints about that. I am more of a fan of 28 Days Later and its gritty, grimy, real, washed out analog look. I'm a big fan of that. It just happens to be that that movie sort of took me back to like the 90s television and the things that scared me as a kid. So I was a big fan of that. So I think the further it's gone away from that, the less I've been engaged. I think the more Hollywood it's got, it's sort of taken me away from the original movie. And I try now to sort of watch each one as if it's a separate happening. I think the more I think about 28 Weeks Later, the less I like it. And I really didn't like the last one as much as I'd hoped. So I'm going into this one and say, oh, this looks really nice. What can you give me now that's a little bit different, that's going to get me back on board? Now, what I think Nia DaCosta does really well here is she takes the Jimmy Gang and she takes away all that goofiness from the end of the last movie, and she makes them what they're supposed to be, which is evil. If you're going to be symbolic about this and you're going to have them all dressed up like a man like that, let's make them that. They might be unknowing, certainly for what they're trying to say. These people don't know the crimes of this individual, and they don't know what happens in the future, obviously, or what he was doing. It's almost like they're channeling that inner evil. So I'm okay with that. And I got the message in the last one. They just didn't put it across very well because of the silliness. In this, I actually understand they are the worst kind of people. And the thing is, they may not all be bad to begin with. They are being led by Jack O'Connell's character, Sir Lord Jimmy Crystal. And Jack O'Connell is exceptional in this movie. If there's one reason to watch this film, it's his performance. And I think you could say that about a lot of movies. My first introduction to Jack O'Connell was probably when he played Bobby Charlton in United. I saw him in Eden Lake. I won't be watching that movie again, but his performance does stand out. And he is continuing now to be a force to be reckoned with. He really steals the screen in a lot of the scenes he's in this. I love his accent in this in particular. There's something very slight and immediate about it, but it's also tinged with the most vile and fantastical evil you can think of. And he is leading this gang and insistence on their worship. He is the son of Satan, essentially, Old Nick, as he is known as. Some of this gang, I think, are genuinely psychopathic, are genuinely sick and twisted, and this is their absolute safe space to practice that. This is their haven. They are happy to follow this leadership and be able to carry out the things they do, whereas others, I think, are being dragged along because they need a purpose and they need a place. And that's certainly the case with Spike. It's quite a nice little social commentary on what bullies are like and what dictators are like, people that run countries that shouldn't be running them. They don't personally pose any threat themselves. They won't carry out anything on their own because they are too cowardly to do so, but they know that they can get their minions to do their bidding, and they've got people around them that are at their beck and call, weaker people. So it's a nice little social commentary on bullying, I think. And that was quite impressive, and that kept me really interested, and that's something I was losing in the first movie. I wasn't too invested with what was going on because I was either pointing out things that didn't make sense, or it was at times when the emotion was strong, it sort of just got cut off. So I think in this one they keep a steady pace. I think the overall structure of this movie is so much tighter than the last one. I think Ralph Fiennes in this is absolutely amazing. And in particular, one scene which will be talked about for years, hopefully, I believe, will become something else musically if given the opportunity, because if you're going to re-release something, you've just got your material there visually to make it a second time success. His performance is absolutely off the charts. He really gives it his all in this. He is sympathetic and soft when necessary and balls to the wall. I love that phrase. I use it a lot, but it absolutely applies here when necessary. He is superb. So if you're going to watch this movie with skepticism like I did, I certainly recommend it for the performances of Jack O'Connell and Ralph Fiennes on their own. Some of the side characters in this seem a little throwaway. There's a couple that I think may be introduced again in the third part of this. So I'm not going to speak on that because there could be a reason for them being there, and certainly some of it's open-ended. I think Erin Kellerman's character is interesting, although I didn't quite understand why she would believe Jimmy Crystal and what he's telling her about the law and the religion in itself, but then not believe that he is who he says he is. She doesn't have the belief in him, but she believes in what he tells her. So I was a bit sort of conflicted on whether that made sense. I also think her dialogue was a little bit weak. It was very sweary, but not with any real impact or purpose. But I do think there's a lot going for her in the next movie if they push it out with her and Spike. I don't think Spike's explored as well as he could have been in this, particularly with how much they gave him in the film before. I think they almost set it up and then shut it down. He doesn't really go anywhere in this other than the frightened child who's standing up for himself. So again, we can only hope that something in 3 knits this all together. I'm not a big fan of telegraphing trilogies, and this is how many movies we're going to make. I didn't really like it with the David Gordon Green Halloween series. I just think when we know there's other films coming, we almost don't review it in the same way, or we let things slide that we really shouldn't, and we're expectant. I just like it when you don't know what's coming, you know, whether or not we're going to get something, and then you get hit with this. Here comes another chapter. I prefer that surprise, but I guess that I'm probably in a minority there. I was a little bit disappointed, and I've actually heard this since, that the father of Spike is nowhere to be seen in this. Aaron Taylor-Johnson, he just doesn't appear. And I would have thought he would be really wanting to find his son. So there's no mention of the causeway if you're expecting that. There may not be spoilers here, but I do think it's important to say that if you liked that aspect of 28 years later with the causeway and the two divided lands, you're not going to see any of that here. It does seem to discard the one before a little too much, and I hope that it might iron out the problems in that. And it doesn't really, it just sort of throws them to one side and picks up from the last 5 minutes. Now, that could be a good thing if you really didn't like the whole of the last movie, but there were aspects of the last movie I thought were a good idea and could have been followed up, and they just didn't in this. But overall, I think the Bone Temple was a ton better than I expected it to be. I went in there with no real enthusiasm, and even after 15 to 20 minutes, I was still like, this isn't really hitting for me, I don't think. And it seemed to pull it around. It seemed to get a little bit better as it went along. The end to this film, the third act, is interesting and again is a setup. We know it's a setup, but it does sort of come out of left field a little bit and you don't see it coming. I quite like that. And it also felt very much, particularly those last few scenes, there are elements of this movie actually dotted in and around it that feel like the original film and feel like, you know, when you see those overhead shots of the fields and the farms and the desolate area, there are certain parts of this film which actually did remind me of the earlier movie, which was good. So I would certainly recommend this one. I wouldn't have recommended the last, but I guess you've got to watch that if you want to understand where this has come from, although it's not absolutely necessary. As I mentioned before, they do discard a lot of what went before, but I do recommend this one. This one got a 3 on Letterboxd for me and the last one got a 2, so they've done something right there, and it gives me a little bit of hope that I might enjoy the third installment of this and it might have pulled it around after a little bit of a blip, and then maybe I can rank all of these movies together, which would be a nice thing to do. Certainly after I've seen the third, that'll be an idea for a video down the line. So do check out the Bone Temple. Do tell me what you think of it or what you thought of it if you've already seen it down in the comments below. And let me know if you disagree or agree with anything. I'm always up for a discussion, and in particular, this has been a nice surprise. I was expecting a negative review today and it actually really wasn't that bad. So yeah, Bone Temple. There's a lot of bone in it, but it doesn't fire a blank. Thanks guys, if you enjoyed this video, please check these other ones down below. I've got a lot of content coming up once I can move house and get a new studio. We are going to be rocking and rolling, but for now, please enjoy the rest of your day. Check out the rest of my stuff and comment and like and share, subscribe. I appreciate all your interactions. You're all legends. Take it easy, everybody.